The for loop is used as the counted loop. It's used when you want to repeat an action a specified number of times. The action can be a single statement or it can be a set of statements. An iterator or a loop variable is used to specify how many times to repeat the action. The general form of a for loop looks like this. You start with the reserved word for, then you have your iterator or loop variable, the assignment operator, and then a range, which is specified by a vector. Then you have the action, which is again any number of valid MATLAB statements. And the action is ended with the reserved word end. In terms of style, we always indent the action so that it's easy to see. The way it works is that the loop variable loops or iterates through all of the values in the vector. For every value in the vector, the action is repeated. So for every value of the loop variable, the action is repeated. Sometimes we use the iterator variable in the action itself. Here's an example of a loop that uses the iterator variable. For example, in the command window, we might type for I, that's the loop variable, gets the value of 1:3. So the vector is 1, 2, 3. And then the action is to print I is and the value of I. There is only one statement in the action, which is ended with the word end. If we enter that in the command window, then immediately after the end that ends the for loop, MATLAB will display the result. In this case, the action of printing is repeated for every value of I. So when I has the value 1, it prints I is 1. Then when I gets the next value in the range, it prints I is 2. And then when I gets the final value in the vector, it prints I is 3. The use of the word I, or the variable name I, for the loop variable is historical. It goes way back to early versions of Fortran and the ways in which you had to name variables in Fortran. But basically ever since, programmers in many languages have used loop variables called I, J, K, etc. In MATLAB, the use of I or J could be a problem because those are built in as constants for the square root of -1. But if you're not going to use the value of the square root of -1 in your code, it's okay to use I and J as loop variables in MATLAB. So this was an example of a loop in which the value of the loop variable I is actually used in the action. Sometimes, however, the loop or iterator variable is not used in the action. It simply specifies how many times to repeat the action. Here's another example of a for loop that we could have in the command window. For I gets the value of 1 to 3. The action is to display the string howdy, and the end ends that action. So in the command window, when we enter that for loop, it will print howdy, howdy, howdy. For every value of the loop variable I, when I has a value 1, it prints howdy. When I has a value 2, it prints howdy. When I has the value 3, it prints howdy. So in this case, the value of I is not actually used. It's just specifying that we're going to repeat this action 3 times. Any vector that has 3 values in it would accomplish exactly the same result. So I could also say for I gets the value of 2:4. That means when I has the value 2, we would print howdy. When I has a value 3, we would print howdy. And when I has a value 4, we would print howdy. Or another example, I could say for itVar. Again, it doesn't have to be called I, it's just the name of a variable. Gets the value of a vector 4, 11, 2. Again, with 3 elements, that would specify that we're going to repeat the action of printing howdy 3 times. It makes a lot more sense, however, to use the colon operator and to say for I gets the value of 1:3. One application that is possible in MATLAB of a for loop is to use the subplot function. What the subplot function does is it creates a matrix or a vector in the figure window so that multiple plots can be viewed at the same time. If the matrix is m by n, the call to the subplot function would be subplot in parentheses m, n, I, and that refers to the ith part of the figure window. So the first two arguments that you pass to the subplot function are the dimensions of the figure window, and the third is the part of the figure window in which you're referencing. The elements in the figure window are numbered row-wise with the subplot function, in contrast to almost everything else in MATLAB, which are numbered column-wise. So it's not always possible, but it is sometimes possible to use a for loop to iterate through the elements in the subplot in the figure window. For example, if the subplot matrix is going to be 2 by 2, it might be possible to loop through the 4 elements to produce 4 separate plots, if the plot is based on the value of the loop variable I. So if we have a 2 by 2 subplot in the figure window, again, it numbers the parts of the subplot row-wise. So the upper left corner of the figure window would be plot 1, the upper right would be plot 2, the lower left would be plot 3, and the lower right would be plot 4. In a for loop, we would loop through the 4 different parts of the subplot, saying for I gets a value of 1:4. The call to the subplot function would be subplot 2, 2, I. So the first two arguments are always specifying the dimensions of the subplot, in this case a 2 by 2 matrix. And the third argument refers to the part of the subplot. So in this case, I would first have the value 1, and we were talking about plot 1. Second time through the action of the loop, I would have the value 2, and we would be talking about plot 2, and so forth. And then after referring to each individual plot, what you would do is create that particular plot in the for loop.